Hello, in this video tutorial on estimating threshold panel data models, that is fixed effect, non-dynamic or dynamic panel data models using threshold regression. Before going to estimate a threshold regression and Stata, let us see what is actually a threshold. In simple words, we can see that the threshold is actually two different types of relationships existing in a single data set. For example, if we look into the data set on inflation, there might be a periods of low inflation and some periods of high inflation. The relationship between low inflation and a dependent variable are similarly other variables, and the relationship between high inflation and the other variables might be different. So in this example, we can see the effect of inflation on economic growth, and we can split that effect of inflation on economic growth between the low inflation periods and high inflation periods. So if we can find out such specification for any type of data, that might be a panel data, that might be a time series data, and we can specify these time periods or these kind of relationships, we might be better off to use threshold regression. So now let us see how to estimate a threshold regression using Stata. For that, I would have to find out the relevant Stata code, and we can see that I have already found that code, that is xthereg. If one is not installed that code, then we can find it and install it before going to estimate a panel data threshold regression. So let's see, we can open this link, and then you have to click here to install link, and then you have to download the auxiliary files that include some additional simulation and example do files and example data set. So once it is installed, we would be able to run the examples from that help file. So I would open a help file, and that gives me a few examples of using panel data threshold models. So we can estimate a single threshold model, we can find out multiple in similarly triple threshold models. So these codes might be useful to estimate a simple threshold regression. I would have to copy this code and go to Stata and just paste, because I have already opened the data set and that I have downloaded during the installation of the code. So once it is done, we would have to change this bootstrap, for example, to 50, because it would take a little bit more time if it is more. So I would use 50, and then I would see that how the results are producing. So let me explain a few things in this code. These are some specifications that defines the threshold regression. So what does actually that mean? I would have to go to the help file to understand the code. Actually, Rx is actually allowing to specify the nature of the variables in the list of the variables, where that is a regime dependent variable, and similarly Qx gives us the variable or list of variables where we can see the thresholds. Similarly, we can define whether there is one threshold, there might be multiple thresholds, and grade is actually the number of grade points that we have to specify, and we can include any other options that we deem necessary for estimating the relationship. So once we are done, we can identify the nature of the variables, that might be the dependent variable and the list of the independent variables. And once we are done with the specification of all the relevant codes, and we have already defined the number of thresholds and the regime specific variables and the threshold specific variables, and bootstrap simulations we can include 200 or 300 or 100. So I'm using 50 only for this tutorial. You can and just remember that more replications or more simulations is actually a better one. So let us see how the code is working, and we would be able to find out the coefficients that we have to split the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable between two different regimes that we actually call different. So let me wait for procedures to be estimated, because I have already specified 50 grades. So these are actually going to be 50, and then the results will be produced. Maybe we would find we will get some error if the smaller bootstrap is not creating the results, but still we would be able to see that the code is working and we are actually getting the results. So now this is exactly the regression type of results where we have to find out the coefficients and the significance value, and we can find out the specifications related to the thresholds. So interpretation of a threshold model is very easy, and we can interpret it like the simple panel data model, but we have to split the relationship between low inflation and high inflation as in our example data set. Thank you very much.